The ER was loud, too loud until it wasn't. Monitors screamed, boots pounded across the floor, and a Marine major barked orders even as blood soaked through the sheets. He didn't look at her when she stepped in. He didn't ask her name. He dismissed her care with a wave of his hand, convinced rank could outrun pain. Then she stopped. No arguing, no explanations. She reached up slow and deliberate and rolled up her sleeve. The room froze. A unit crest scarred, unmistakable, and never worn by anyone who hadn't survived hell, caught the fluorescent light. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the Marine major went silent, staring at the symbol he knew too well, and at the woman he had just underestimated. In that moment, authority shifted. Not with a shout, not with a salute, but with truth. Before we dive in, where are you watching from today? Drop your location and local time in the comments. And if you're drawn to stories where silence hides strength, hit subscribe and stay with us. The rain had started just before midnight, a cold, relentless sheet that slicked the hospital roof and blurred the red warning lights lining the helipad. From above, the medical center looked like a ship under siege, windows, glowing doors opening and closing in frantic rhythm. When the helicopter touched down, its rotors tore through the storm, forcing orderlies to brace themselves as they ran forward with the gurney. Inside the ER, the air was thick with disinfectant sweat and urgency. Major Daniel Reeves arrived conscious but combative, jaw clenched hard enough to grind his teeth. Blood soaked through the temporary bandages around his lower abdomen and side, darkening the sheets beneath him. His camis had been cut away mid-flight, leaving only the remnants of rank, his bearing, his voice, his certainty. "Careful with that," Reeves snapped as the gurney jolted over the threshold. "That wound's not civilian grade." A trauma nurse opened her mouth to respond, then hesitated. Everyone knew the type. Officers like Reeves didn't ask. They commanded. Even now, pale and sweating, he scanned the room like a battlefield, cataloging faces, weighing threats, asserting control where he could find it. "Vitals," a resident asked. "BP's dropping. 90/50, someone answered. "Pulse 120. Reeves turned his head sharply. "Who's in charge here, Doctor?" Alan Whitmore stepped forward, calm but visibly calculating. "I am. Doctor. Whitmore. We're going to take care of you." Reeves studied him, eyes narrowing. "Good. Then get someone who knows combat trauma. I don't want guesswork." A few feet back, Emily Carter adjusted her gloves without looking up. She had been charting quiet, almost invisible among the rush of scrubs and raised voices. Her posture was relaxed, her movements efficient, as if chaos registered as background noise. She stepped forward when Whitmore nodded. "I'll assist," she said evenly. Reeves barely glanced at her. "No." The word was sharp, final. Emily paused, eyes lifting to his face for the briefest moment. There was no offense there, no surprise, just acknowledgement. "I'm assigned to this bay," she replied. "We need to assess internal bleeding before I said no," Reeves cut in. "Get me someone else, a senior trauma specialist, or a military surgeon." Whitmore opened his mouth, then closed it again. He could feel the eyes of his staff on him, nurses, residents, techs, all waiting to see whether the hospital would bend to rank or stand by protocol. Major Whitmore said carefully, "Emily is qualified. We don't have time to reshuffle." Reeves let out a short, humorless laugh that turned into a grimace as pain flared. "Qualified for what? Holding pressure. I've seen more medics in the field than you have nurses here." Emily didn't respond. She reached for the ultrasound instead, positioning it with practiced ease. Reeves swatted at her hand. "Don't touch me." The room went still. Whitmore's voice hardened. "Major Reeves, if you interfere, you put yourself at risk." Reeves met his gaze unblinking. "That's my call." For a second, Emily considered stepping back. It would have been easier, cleaner. She'd done it before, let others take the lead, let assumptions stand. But the numbers on the monitor were sliding, and the bleeding pattern didn't care about pride. "She's right," Emily said, calm but firm. "You're losing volume fast. If we wait, you won't make it to the OR." Reeves finally looked at her then. Really looked. She was unassuming, early 30s, hair pulled back tight, no visible rank or credentials that he could read at a glance. Her voice lacked the clipped authority he was used to. To him, she was just another hospital staffer overstepping. "You don't get to tell me what I can survive," he said coldly. Emily held his gaze. There was something in her eyes that didn't flinch. Not defiance, not fear, just certainty. Then let me show you, she replied. Whitmore seized the moment. Proceed. As Emily ran the probe, the monitor flickered to life. Dark pools appeared where they shouldn't be. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Free fluid in the abdomen, she said. Likely splenic involvement. Reeves exhaled sharply, more pain than disbelief. You sure? Yes. The answer was immediate. No hesitation. Whitmore leaned closer, reading the screen. Prep the ore. As the team moved, Reeves watched Emily from the corner of his eye. Her hands were steady movements, precise. She anticipated needs before they were voiced, adjusting lines, issuing short instructions that others followed without question. It unsettled him. You've done this before, he muttered. Emily didn't answer. On the periphery, whispers started quiet, curious. Someone had noticed the way she worked, the way Whitmore deferred without realizing it. Another nurse caught a glimpse of old scars near her wrist before Emily tugged her sleeve back down. Outside, thunder rolled low and heavy. Reeves was wheeled toward imaging, then back again as his pressure dipped further. Every bump sent a spike of pain through him, every breath more labored than the last. You're not listening, he said, suddenly voice strained. If this goes wrong, it won't, Emily said. The certainty in her tone stopped him short. You don't know that. I do. Reeves laughed weakly. You sound like someone who's been lucky. Emily adjusted his ivy eyes, never leaving the line. Luck runs out. Training doesn't. The words landed harder than she intended. Reeves studied her face, searching for sarcasm. Finding none. For the first time since he'd arrived, doubt crept in, not about his injury, but about her. About what she knew. About why she sounded like someone who had seen worse than this, and lived. Who are you? He asked quietly. Emily met his eyes again, just for a moment. Right now, she said, I'm the one keeping you alive. The gurney stopped outside the OR doors. Red lights flashed overhead. The storm raged on above them, rotors chopping the air as another helicopter circled, waiting for clearance. As the doors swung open, Reeves caught a glimpse of something beneath Emily's sleeve as she reached forward, a line of ink, dark and deliberate, disappearing before he could focus. His breath hitched. Wait, he said. Emily turned. What unit is that? Reeves asked, voice barely audible over the alarms. Emily looked down, then back up at him. Her expression didn't change. You're not ready for that yet, she said. And then the doors closed. The OR lights burned bright and unforgiving, bleaching the room of shadows as if truth itself demanded clarity. Stainless steel gleamed. Monitors hummed. The rain outside faded into a distant percussion, replaced by the rhythmic beeping that marked the thin line between control and collapse. Major Daniel Reeves lay motionless, arms out, chest rising shallowly. The anesthesia dulled the pain, but not the tension. Even sedated, his brow stayed, furrowed jaw set as if bracing for an impact no one else could see. Doctor. Whitmore stood at the head of the table, gloved hands, poised eyes flicking from monitor to patient. Let's move, he said. We don't have margin. Emily Carter took her position without ceremony. She checked clamps, verified instruments, adjusted suction. Each action flowed into the next, no wasted motion, no hesitation. The room seemed to calibrate to her tempo. A resident whispered, She's fast. Another murmured back, Yeah, like she's done this 1,000 times. Whitmore caught the exchange but said nothing. He had learned over years of trauma medicine to recognize competence that didn't announce itself. Emily had that kind, the dangerous kind that didn't seek validation. As the incision was made and the cavity opened, blood pooled faster than expected. The splenic tear was worse than imaging had suggested. Pressures dropping, anesthesia called out. 85 systolic. Clamp, Emily said quietly, already moving. Whitmore glanced at her. You see something? Yes, she replied. Secondary bleed near the hilum. If we chase the obvious, we'll lose him. There it was again, that certainty. Whitmore trusted his eyes. He trusted data, and increasingly he trusted her. Do it, he said. Emily leaned in, hands steady despite the surge of blood. She adjusted, angle, changed approach, called for a different clamp without raising her voice. The room followed. Minutes stretched. The numbers stabilized, then dipped, then steadied again. Outside the OR, the hospital hummed with rumors. A Marine major. A storm. A helicopter still circling because clearance hadn't been revoked. People sensed significance, even if they didn't know why. Inside, Reeves drifted in and out of awareness. Snatches of sound pierced the fog, voices, commands, the clink of metal. In his mind, images overlapped: desert heat, the smell of cordite, a man screaming for a medic who never came. Then a woman's voice, calm and unyielding. "Stay with me." He didn't know if she meant now or years ago. "Pressure's coming up," anesthesia said. Emily exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly. She shifted to the next task, already thinking 2 steps ahead. Trauma like this didn't forgive complacency. Whitmore watched her work and felt something unfamiliar, relief edged with unease. He had assumed she was a skilled clinician. He hadn't assumed this. "You've managed combat wounds," he said quietly, careful to keep it clinical. Emily didn't look up. "I've managed worse." It wasn't a boast. It was a statement of fact. The resident assisting her noticed the scars on her forearm again, thin lines, old and pale, the kind that didn't come from accidents. Emily pulled her sleeve down without comment, refocusing. "Close," she said. As sutures went in and the wound was stabilized, the room finally released a breath it hadn't known it was holding. Reeves's vitals settled into something resembling safe. Whitmore stepped back. "Good work." Emily nodded once. No smile, no relief displayed. She began to clean up hands, methodical mind, already detaching. When Reeves was transferred to recovery, the tension followed him like a shadow. Word had spread that he'd tried to refuse care, that he'd underestimated someone. People filled in the blanks with speculation. In recovery, Reeves surfaced slowly. The pain was muted, but present a heavy ache that anchored him to his body. He blinked against the light, disoriented. Where he rasped. "You're stable," a nurse said. "Surgery went well." Reeves swallowed. His throat was dry, his thoughts sluggish. He remembered flashes, blood, voices, a sleeve being pulled down. Emily stood near the doorway, arms crossed, loosely observing. She hadn't planned to stay, but something had kept her there, a sense of unfinished business, perhaps. Reeves' eyes found her. Even groggy, he recognized her immediately. "You," he said. "Yes." He studied her face, trying to reconcile it with the calm authority he'd felt on the table. "You didn't answer my question." Emily didn't move closer. "You didn't need the answer then." "I do now," Reeves said. The edge was gone from his voice, replaced by something rawer. "That ink, that crest." Emily was silent for a beat too long. Whitmore entered quietly, reading the room. "Major, you're going to need rest." Reeves ignored him. "I've seen that symbol," he said, eyes never leaving Emily. "Briefings, redacted reports, the kind of unit that doesn't show up on paper." Emily met his gaze. There was no pride there, no fear, just a boundary. "You saw part of it," she said. "That's all." Reeves let out a short breath that turned into a cough. "You let me talk to you like that." "I've heard worse," Emily replied. The admission hit him harder than any reprimand would have. Outside, the helicopter finally lifted off, its mission complete or postponed. Reeves wasn't sure which. The sound faded, leaving an unsettling quiet in its wake. "What happens now?" Reeves asked. "You heal," Whitmore said. "Then there will be questions." Reeves nodded slowly. He understood that language. After-action reports. Accountability. He had lived by them. His eyes returned to Emily. "You could have corrected me. Shut me down." Emily shrugged. "It wouldn't have changed what mattered." "And what's that?" Reeves asked. "That you lived." The simplicity of it left him speechless. As she turned to leave, Reeves spoke again. "Emily." She paused. "I was wrong," he said, voice low. "About you." Emily looked back. For the first time, something flickered across her expression, not satisfaction, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. "That wasn't the first time," she said, "and it won't be the last." She left the room, footsteps fading down the hall. Reeves stared at the ceiling, mind racing despite the medication. He had built his career on judgment of terrain, of people, of threats. Tonight, he had misjudged someone profoundly. And for the first time in a long while, the realization unsettled him more than the wound ever could. By dawn, the storm had moved east, leaving the hospital wrapped in a strange, brittle calm. Water dripped from the roof in steady intervals, echoing down concrete like a metronome marking time. Inside, the ER reset itself, beds wiped down, charts closed, voices lowered. But the tension from the night before lingered, clinging to corners and glances. Major Daniel Reeves lay awake in recovery, staring at the muted television mounted high on the wall. He hadn't turned it on. The silence felt earned. Every breath still pulled tight at his side, a reminder of how close he'd come to losing control of his body, of the room, of the narrative he was used to commanding. A nurse adjusted his IV and left without a word. Reeves watched the door long after it closed. Across the corridor, Emily Carter stood at a workstation finishing notes with precise keystrokes. Her face was composed, almost blank, but her shoulders carried a weight that hadn't been there before the surgery. She could feel it in the way people looked at her. Now, quick glances whispered curiosity. Respect, maybe. Or suspicion. Neither sat comfortably. "Emily, doctor," Whitmore said, quietly approaching from behind. A word. She nodded and followed him into a small consult room. The door closed with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. "You handled that well," Whitmore began. "Exceptionally well." Emily met his gaze. It was a team effort. Whitmore smiled faintly. "You know that's not what I mean." He hesitated, then continued. "The Major's command has already called. They want a debrief." Emily's jaw tightened. "About the surgery, about everything," Whitmore said. "They're curious. Curious." The word carried weight. Emily had heard it before, usually right before doors closed or lines were redrawn. "I don't discuss my past," she said evenly. Whitmore nodded. "I figured, but understand they're not used to surprises, especially ones like you." Emily looked down at her hands. They were steady. They always were. "I didn't ask to be recognized." "No," Whitmore agreed, "but recognition has a way of finding its own path." Down the hall, Reeves shifted, wincing as pain flared. His thoughts circled back to the OR, to the moments when he'd felt his authority evaporate under Emily's quiet certainty. He'd built his life on command structures, clear lines, visible insignia. Emily had disrupted that with nothing more than competence and restraint. A knock sounded at his door. "Come in," he said. Emily stepped inside, stopping just short of the bed. For a moment, neither spoke. "I was told you wanted to see me," she said. Reeves nodded. "I did." He gestured weakly to the chair beside him. "Sit, if you want." She considered, then sat. "I've been replaying last night," Reeves began. "Not the pain, the decisions." Emily waited. "I misread you," he said. "Worse, I dismissed you." His voice roughened. "That's on me." Emily's expression didn't change. "It happens." "To you?" Reeves asked, incredulous. "Still, yes." He shook his head slowly. "You shouldn't have had to prove anything." "I didn't," Emily replied. "I did my job." The simplicity of the statement cut through his defensiveness. Reeves swallowed. "That Crest," he started. Emily raised a hand, stopping him. "I didn't show it to make a point." "Then why?" he asked. She held his gaze. "Because you were about to make a decision that would have killed you." The words hung between them, stark and undeniable. Reeves looked away, jaw tightening. He had faced enemy fire without flinching. This felt worse. "I spent years believing rank equaled right," he said quietly. "Last night proved otherwise." Emily leaned back slightly. "Rank has its place. So does humility." Outside footsteps approached. A man in civilian attire but unmistakable military bearing entered, eyes sharp, posture rigid. "Major Reeves," he said. "I'm Colonel Harris. We need to talk." Harris's gaze flicked to Emily, assessing cataloging. Recognition sparked there, brief but unmistakable. "So," Harris said, tone measured. "You're the one." Emily stood. "If this is about my record, it's about your silence," Harris interrupted. "And the fact that it just saved one of my officers." Reeves watched the exchange, something twisting in his chest. "She saved me," he said firmly. "Full stop." Harris studied him, then nodded. "Understood." He turned back to Emily. "There will be inquiries. Formal ones." Emily met his gaze without blinking. "There always are." "Yes," Harris agreed. "But there are also protections." Emily didn't respond. Harris sighed. "You never liked the spotlight." "No," Emily said. "I liked getting people home." The Colonel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Then consider this, an extension of that." After Harris left, the room felt smaller. Reeves broke the silence. "You could have left," he said. "Vanished back into whatever quiet life you built." Emily looked toward the window where early light filtered through rain-streaked glass. "I still might." You shouldn't have to, Reeves said. Not because of me. Emily stood. This isn't about you. He met her eyes. Then what is it about? Emily paused at the door, about knowing when to speak and when silence does more good. She left before he could respond. As the day wore on, word spread not in headlines but in hushed conversations. A Marine major humbled. A caregiver with a past that didn't fit the box. People recalibrated their assumptions quietly, carefully. Reeves lay back, staring at the ceiling once more. He felt exposed, stripped of the armor he'd worn for decades. But beneath that vulnerability was something else, a grudging gratitude and a growing respect that had nothing to do with insignia. Down the hall, Emily changed out of her scrubs, slipping back into anonymity. Yet she could feel it, the shift. The way eyes followed her, the way silence fell when she entered a room. She pulled her sleeve down over the faint outline of ink and breathed out slowly. The past had a way of resurfacing, and this time it wasn't finished with her yet. By late afternoon, the hospital no longer pretended that nothing unusual had happened. It showed in the way conversations stopped when Emily Carter walked past, in the way nurses double-checked charts they'd already reviewed, in the way security lingered a little longer near the recovery wing, as if something classified might suddenly spill out into the hallway. Emily noticed all of it. She always did. She finished her shift notes in silence, fingers moving steadily across the keyboard, while her mind ran ahead, mapping consequences. Experience had taught her that the most dangerous moments didn't come during chaos, but after, when people had time to ask questions. Dr. Whitmore leaned against the counter beside her. You could take the rest of the day, he offered. No one would question it. Emily shook her head. I'm fine. You sure? He pressed. Command pressure is real, especially when egos get bruised. Emily closed the chart and finally looked up at him. Pressure is familiar. Whitmore studied her for a long second, then nodded. If you need backup, I won't, she said gently. But thank you. Across the hall, Major Reeves was sitting up for the first time, a rigid brace supporting his side. Pain tugged at him with every breath, but he welcomed it. It kept him anchored, alert. Colonel Harris stood near the foot of the bed, hands clasped behind his back. You embarrassed yourself, Harris said bluntly. Reeves didn't flinch. I know. Worse, Harris continued. You nearly compromised an asset. Reeves frowned. She's not an asset. Harris's eyes sharpened. Everyone with her background is an asset, whether they like it or not. Reeves exhaled slowly. That mindset is exactly why she stayed quiet. Harris said nothing, but the silence spoke volumes. She didn't pull rank, Reeves went on. Didn't threaten, didn't even correct me. His jaw tightened. She saved me anyway. Harris nodded once. That's who she is. The admission startled Reeves. You know her. I know of her, Harris corrected. Enough to say this, people like Emily Carter don't exist for recognition. They exist for outcomes. Reeves absorbed that. Then why bring command into this? Because command noticed, Harris replied. And once they notice, they don't look away. Down the corridor, Emily pushed through a set of double doors into the stairwell. She preferred the stairs when her thoughts grew too loud. The echo of her footsteps grounded her, the concrete walls familiar, almost comforting. Halfway down, her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She stared at it for a moment before answering. Carter. Emily, a male voice, said low and controlled. It's been a long time. Her grip tightened. Not long enough, apparently. A pause. Then, we need to talk. No, she said. You want to talk. Same thing, the voice replied. Circumstances have changed. Emily stopped on the landing, rain-filtered light spilling through a narrow window. They always do, she said. That's why I left. You left because you were burned out, the voice countered. And because you didn't trust command. Emily smiled without humor. I didn't trust people. Silence stretched. Then quieter. We're not here to pull you back in. Good, she said. We're here to understand why a Marine major almost died before you stepped in. Emily closed her eyes. He almost died because he thought authority replaced judgment. And you let him think that the voice said, I let him choose, Emily replied. That's different. Another pause. You're walking a thin line. I always have. The call ended without goodbye. Emily leaned her head back against the concrete wall. Breath steady, pulse calm. This was the part she hated, not the danger, not the pressure, but the inevitability. Once the past knocked, it never accepted silence as an answer. Back in recovery, Reeves watched the ceiling tiles blur as pain medication dulled the edges of his thoughts. He replayed Emily's movements in the awe, the economy of motion, the confidence that didn't announce itself. "You ever wonder," he asked suddenly, "how many people like her are out there?" Harris looked at him. "More than you think. And we ignore them," Reeves said. "Until we need them." Harris didn't argue. Later that evening, a junior officer entered Reeves's room with a tablet. "Sir Command wants your preliminary statement." Reeves took the tablet, scrolling through the form. It was clinical, safe. It left room to omit. He looked up. "I want to include her role." The officer hesitated. "Sir, I want it on record," Reeves said firmly. "All of it." Harris watched, expression unreadable. "You know what that does?" "Yes," Reeves replied. "It tells the truth." The officer nodded and left. In the locker room, Emily changed out of her scrubs, the quiet, broken only by the distant hum of the hospital settling into night shift. She paused, fingers brushing the fabric over her forearm. The Crest lay beneath, inked years ago in a place far from fluorescent lights and polished floors. A reminder of who she'd been, of who she still was, whether she wanted to be or not. Her phone vibrated again. This time a message. "They're escalating. Be careful." Emily slipped the phone into her pocket and pulled on her jacket. Outside, the sky had cleared, stars faint but visible. She took a deep breath, shoulders squaring as she stepped into the cool night air. Inside the hospital, Major Reeves signed his statement, sealing a decision he couldn't take back. Two paths intersecting again, and neither of them knew just how far the consequences would reach. Night settled over the hospital like a held breath. The corridor's dimmed lights lowered to a muted glow that softened edges but sharpened shadows. Monitors continued their quiet vigil, beeping steadily, indifferent to rank, reputation, or regret. For most patients, the night shift meant rest. For Major Daniel Reeves, it meant reckoning. He lay awake, pain radiating in slow waves beneath the medication. Each pulse brought back fragments of the day, Emily's voice, controlled and unwavering. The way the room had moved when she moved. The look on Colonel Harris's face when recognition had flickered there uninvited. Reeves had faced enemy fire without hesitation. This felt different. This felt personal. Down the hall, Emily Carter stood alone in the staff lounge, a paper cup of coffee cooling untouched in her hand. She hadn't meant to stop here. Her body had simply carried her to a quiet place, one with no windows and no questions. She stared at the wall, mind drifting not back to the OR but further, to places she rarely allowed herself to revisit. Dust, heat, the metallic taste of adrenaline. She shook her head, slightly grounding herself. That life was behind her. She had made sure of it. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She turned. Dr. Whitmore stood in the doorway, expression careful. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to intrude." "You're not," Emily replied. "What's up?" Whitmore stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Command's asking questions." "Not formally. Yet." Emily nodded. "They always start that way." He studied her for a moment. "You don't have to answer them alone." "I know," she said. "But I will." Whitmore exhaled. "You ever think about why you chose this place, this hospital?" Emily considered the question. "It was quiet," she said finally, "and far from anything that mattered." Whitmore gave a small, knowing smile. "Funny thing about places like that. They tend to attract storms." Across the hall, Reeves watched as a nurse adjusted his vitals. When she left, he stared at the door, then reached for the call button. Moments later, Emily stepped in. "You asked for me," she said. Reeves nodded. "If you're busy, I'm not." She took the same chair as before, posture relaxed but alert. "I read the statement I gave," Reeves began. "I didn't leave anything out." Emily's brow furrowed slightly. "Why? Because silence protected me once," he said. "I don't want it to hurt you." Emily let out a slow breath. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," Reeves replied. "That's why I'm doing it." She studied him, reassessing. The arrogance was still there, buried under discipline and pain. But something else had taken root, awareness, perhaps, or humility. "People like me don't benefit from records," she said quietly. People like you, Reeves echoed. Emily met his gaze, the kind who exist between lines, between titles. Reeves nodded slowly. I used to think that was a liability, and now I think it's why I'm alive. The admission hung heavy in the room. Emily stood. Get some rest, Major, Emily Reeves said before she could leave. If they come after you, they won't, she interrupted. Not directly, and if they do, Emily's expression softened just a fraction. Then I'll handle it. She left him there, the door closing with a quiet finality. As she walked down the hall, Emily's phone vibrated again. Another message. They're pulling your old file. Full access. Her pace didn't change, but her shoulders stiffened. Full access meant names, missions, things that had never been meant to surface in a civilian hospital hallway. She typed a single reply. Understood. Outside, a black SUV idled near the emergency entrance engine, humming softly. Two figures sat inside, silhouettes against the dashboard lights. They watched the building with practiced patience. Inside, Colonel Harris stood at a window overlooking the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, he said quietly. She's here. A pause. No, I don't think she planned it. Another pause. That's what worries me. In recovery, Reeves drifted towards sleep at last, mind heavy with unfinished thoughts. In his dreams, ranks blurred, insignia faded, replaced by faces people he'd once overlooked, standing steady while chaos raged around them. Emily stepped out into the night, cool air brushing her face. She didn't look at the SUV. She didn't need to. She knew what it meant. The past hadn't just found her. It had decided to stay. Morning arrived without ceremony. Sunlight slid through the hospital's tall windows, pale and indifferent, illuminating hallways that still carried the weight of last night. Staff changed shifts. Coffee cups replaced IV bags, and the world pretended it hadn't come dangerously close to losing a Marine major because of pride. Emily Carter walked in from the employee entrance jacket, zipped halfway, hair tied back tighter than usual. She had slept 4 hours. It was enough. As she crossed the lobby, conversations dipped, not silenced but altered. People noticed her now. Not the way they noticed doctors or administrators, but the way they noticed something they didn't quite understand. She ignored it and headed toward the ER. Behind her, the black SUV rolled forward and parked. Inside recovery, Major Daniel Reeves was sitting upright, physical therapist hovering nearby. Pain still etched his features, but the fog had lifted. His eyes were sharper today, more observant. Easy, the therapist said, as Reeves shifted. You're not cleared for heroics. Reeves huffed softly. Story of my life. His gaze drifted toward the hallway just as Emily passed by the glass wall. Their eyes met briefly. Something passed between them, recognition, unfinished business. Minutes later, Colonel Harris entered the ward, posture stiff, expression unreadable. Major Harris said, "We're moving you to a private room." Reeves frowned. "Why? Because things are about to get loud," Harris replied. Reeves didn't miss the implication. About her. Harris didn't deny it. In a small conference room off the ER, Emily sat across from 2 men in plain clothes. No uniforms, no insignia, just calm eyes and measured voices. Emily Carter, the older one, began. Formally, she raised a hand. "We're not doing that." The man paused, then nodded. "Fair enough." He slid a tablet across the table. "We reviewed your actions last night. They were decisive. They were necessary," Emily said. "You disobeyed a superior officer," the younger man said. Emily leaned back. "I disobeyed a patient who was making a fatal mistake." The older man watched her carefully. "You could have asserted authority." Emily met his gaze. Authority wasn't the problem. Silence settled. Not hostile, assessing. "We're concerned," the younger man said, "that your presence here may compromise. My presence saved a life." Emily cut in. Her voice never rose. "If that's a compromise, you should rethink your priorities." The older man exhaled slowly. "You haven't changed." "No," Emily agreed. "I've just learned when not to speak." Down the hall, Reeves listened as Harris briefed him on the situation. Words like oversight and containment floated through the room. "You're talking about her like she's a liability," Reeves said sharply. "I'm talking about her like she's a variable," Harris replied. "And variables make command nervous." Reeves grimaced as pain flared, then steadied. "She deserves better." Harris looked at him. "So do a lot of people." In the ER, A minor trauma rolled in a car accident victim with internal injuries. The room snapped back into motion. Emily was on her feet instantly, instincts overriding tension. She moved into position without being asked. The younger man from the conference room followed her in, watching closely. "Vitals?" Emily asked. "BP, unstable," a nurse replied. Emily reached for the ultrasound sleeves, pushed up just enough to avoid contamination. Reeves, being wheeled past en route to imaging, caught sight of her again through the glass. His eyes tracked her movements, sharper now, more curious than dismissive. Then he saw it. Just above her wrist, partially obscured by glove and motion, a familiar curve of ink. Dark. Intentional. His breath caught. That he whispered. Harris followed his gaze, then stiffened. Inside the ER, the younger man noticed it too. His eyes flicked from the Crest to Emily's face, recognition dawning. The room didn't stop. Monitors kept beeping. Orders kept flowing. But something had shifted. Emily felt it, a change in the air, subtle but unmistakable. She finished stabilizing the patient and stepped back, finally tugging her sleeve down. Too late. Reeves's gurney stopped abruptly. "Stop," he said, voice strained but urgent. Harris frowned. "Major, you're not cleared. That symbol," Reeves said, eyes locked on Emily. "I know it." The room quieted. Emily turned slowly. "From where?" she asked. Reeves swallowed. "From briefings that never had names attached. From units that didn't exist on paper." The younger man stepped forward. "Major, no Reeves," said sharper now. "I want to hear it from her." Emily studied Reeves for a long moment. She could have deflected, redirected. She had done it 100 times before. Instead, she reached up. Not all the way, just enough. The Crest emerged fully, this time unmistakable, under the ER lights, etched with precision, worn without apology. A symbol of a unit few acknowledged and fewer survived. The room froze. Nurses stared. Doctors stopped mid-motion. Even the monitors seemed to hold their breath. Reeves felt something inside him settle into place. Awe and shame. "You dismissed her care," Harris said quietly beside him, without knowing who she was. Emily lowered her arm. "I didn't show it for recognition," she said evenly. "I showed it because you were about to die." The weight of the moment pressed in from all sides. And for the first time since she'd walked into that hospital, Emily Carter stood fully revealed, no longer invisible, no longer silent. The consequences were already moving. The ER did not erupt. It didn't need to. Silence, when it arrived, was far more devastating. Emily Carter stood motionless beneath the lights, her sleeve still partially rolled, the unit crest exposed in full view now. It wasn't flashy, no dramatic flourish. Just ink, dark, precise, earned the hard way. The kind of symbol that didn't ask for recognition and didn't survive myths. Around her, the room had stopped breathing. A nurse froze with a syringe mid-air. A resident's mouth hung slightly open, words abandoned halfway out. Even the monitors seemed quieter, their steady beeps suddenly intrusive, almost disrespectful. Major Daniel Reeves felt the moment land like a physical blow. He knew that Crest, not from recruitment posters or official briefings, from whispered conversations in secure rooms, from casualty reports that skipped names and jumped straight to numbers, from operations spoken about only in fragments followed by long pauses and lowered voices. "You don't wear that unless..." Reeves began, then stopped. "Unless you'd been somewhere command didn't acknowledge. Unless you'd crossed lines most never saw. Unless you'd survived things that didn't make it into doctrine." Emily's gaze didn't waver. "Unless what Major Reeves swallowed. Unless you've earned it." The younger man in plain clothes, Agent Collins, took an involuntary step back. His training told him to control the scene. His instincts told him this was already out of his hands. Colonel Harris exhaled slowly, eyes never leaving Emily. "You should have kept that covered." "I did," Emily replied. "Until it mattered." A beat passed. Then another. "Clear the room," Harris ordered quietly. No one argued. Staff moved on autopilot, ushering patients and non-essential personnel out. Curtains were drawn, doors closed. The ER transformed from a public space into something far more dangerous, a place where truths surfaced. Reeves' gurney had been stopped near the threshold. He gripped the rails, pain-forgotten eyes fixed on Emily like she might vanish if he looked away. "You let me talk down to you," he said hoarsely. You let me dismiss you like you were nothing. Emily finally pulled her sleeve back down. I let you reveal who you were. Reeves flinched. Harris stepped between them, slightly voice measured. Emily Command will have questions. They always do, she said. This time, Harris continued. They'll want answers. Emily tilted her head. About what? About why someone with your background is working triage in a civilian ER. Emily's lips curved, not a smile, not quite. Because it's where I'm useful. Reeves shook his head slowly. You were more than useful. You saved my life. That was the assignment, Emily said. The assignment, Reeves echoed. You weren't ordered here. No, she agreed. I chose it. The words hit him harder than any reprimand. Choice. Something he'd taken for granted most of his career. Collins cleared his throat. With respect, this situation is now classified. Emily's eyes snapped to him. Not angry, just sharp. A man almost died because classification mattered more than judgment. You don't get to hide behind it now. Collins stiffened. That's exactly what it is, she cut in. Harris raised a hand, stopping him. Enough. He turned to Emily. You know how this goes. Debriefs. Reviews. People higher up than me will want to understand why you stayed silent. Emily crossed her arms. Silence kept the focus where it belonged. On the patient. And now, Harris asked. Now, Emily said, glancing briefly at Reeves, the patient knows. Reeves felt heat rise to his face. Shame, sharp and undeniable. He had built his authority on confidence, on being the one with answers. Last night he had been the liability. I was wrong, he said louder now. And I don't mean clinically. I mean fundamentally. No one spoke. Reeves forced himself upright, wincing as pain flared. I dismissed you because you didn't look like what I expected. Because you didn't assert rank. Because you let me think I was in control. Emily met his gaze evenly. You were in control. Reeves blinked. What? You made your choices, she said. I just made sure you lived with them. Harris studied her, something like reluctant admiration in his eyes. You always were brutal with lessons. They stick better, Emily replied. Outside, the ER door's movement caught Reeves's attention. 2 uniformed officers had arrived, faces tight, posture rigid. Word traveled fast when the wrong people noticed the right symbol. Harris glanced at them, then back to Emily. This is escalating. I know. You don't have to face it alone, Reeves said suddenly. I'll testify. I'll put my name on record. Say what you did. Say what I did. Emily looked at him for a long moment. Why? She asked. Reeves didn't hesitate. Because rank without accountability is just noise, and because you deserve better than silence when it's used to erase you. The room felt heavier. Harris nodded slowly. That would carry weight. Emily considered it, then shook her head. This isn't about protecting me. Then what is it about? Reeves pressed. Emily's voice softened, just a fraction. Making sure the next person like you doesn't die because someone like me stayed quiet for the wrong reasons. The words settled deep. A radio crackled outside the room. Orders murmured. Procedures initiated. The world was catching up. Emily stepped back, reclaiming space. I'll cooperate, she said. On my terms. Harris met her gaze. I expected nothing less. Reeves watched her, this woman he had dismissed, underestimated, nearly ignored, into his own grave. And now, stripped of assumptions, he saw her clearly for the first time. Not as a subordinate, not as a mystery, but as someone who had carried responsibility far longer than he ever had. As the officers stepped inside and the process began, Reeves closed his eyes briefly. The Crest had changed everything, and nothing at all. The private conference room on the 3rd floor had no windows. It didn't need them. The air inside was dense with authority, flags folded neatly in the corner, a single seal mounted on the wall, a long table polished to a dull sheen. This was where conversations were meant to be contained, where truths were filtered, shaped, and filed away. Emily Carter sat at one end of the table, hands folded, posture relaxed. Not defensive, not defiant. Waiting. Across from her, 3 men and 1 woman took their seats in measured silence. Colonel Harris stood to the side, arms crossed, a quiet sentinel. Agent Collins hovered near the door tablet in hand-eyes alert. Miss Carter, the woman began, voice calm and practiced. Thank you for agreeing to this discussion. Emily inclined her head slightly. You were going to have it with, or without me. A flicker of something amusement perhaps crossed the woman's face. Fair. Folders slid across the table. None were labeled. You understand why this is complicated, one of the men said. Your background intersects with several programs that don't exist, Emily finished. I'm aware. The man blinked, then nodded. Then you also understand why your presence in a civilian hospital raises concerns. Emily leaned back a fraction. Because it wasn't planned. Because it wasn't controlled, Collins corrected from the doorway. Emily's eyes shifted to him. Control didn't save Major Reeves. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Heavy. The woman folded her hands. Walk us through your decision-making last night. Emily did. She kept it clinical. Symptoms, timelines, probabilities. She didn't dramatize. Didn't defend. When she finished, the room felt smaller, as if the facts had pressed the walls inward. And the Crest, the woman asked. Why reveal it? Emily met her gaze. Because he was about to override medical judgment with authority. He needed a language he understood. And that language was fear, Collins asked. No, Emily said evenly. Credibility. Colonel Harris shifted his weight, a subtle acknowledgement. One of the men cleared his throat. Major Reeves has submitted a statement corroborating your account. Emily's expression didn't change. He's taken responsibility, the woman added. Publicly. That gave Emily pause. Not surprise. Something closer to respect. He didn't have to, Emily said. No, Harris agreed. But he did. Across the building, Reeves lay back against the pillows in his private room, hands clasped over the brace at his side. Pain flared and faded in manageable waves. He welcomed it. It kept him present. Colonel Harris had left him with one instruction: be ready to speak. Reeves stared at the ceiling, replaying his words from the statement. He hadn't softened them, hadn't hidden behind protocol. He'd written the truth about his dismissal, his assumptions, his near-fatal mistake. For the first time in years, it felt like command. A knock sounded. Come in, Reeves said. The woman from the conference room stepped inside, flanked by Harris. Her presence filled the space without effort. Major Reeves, she said. I'm Undersecretary Miller. Reeves nodded. Ma'am. She studied him for a moment. You understand the implications of your statement? Yes, Reeves replied. And I stand by it. Miller glanced at Harris, then back to Reeves. You're aware this could stall your promotion. Reeves didn't hesitate. If my promotion depends on pretending I was right, I don't deserve it. Miller's expression softened just enough to be human. Noted. Back in the conference room, Emily listened as the final questions tapered off. They were no longer probing. They were clarifying. You're not being recalled, Miller said at last, now seated across from Emily again. Nor are you being sanctioned. Emily nodded once. But Miller continued. You will be observed. Emily's lips curved faintly. I always am. A hint of a smile flickered around the table, quickly suppressed. There's another matter, Collins said, glancing at his tablet. Your current position. I like my job, Emily replied. No one's suggesting you leave, Miller said. But there may be expectations. Emily met her gaze steadily. I don't work well with expectations that ignore reality. Miller held the look, then nodded. That tracks. When the meeting adjourned, Emily stood shoulders loose, breathing steady. Harris walked her to the door. You handled that better than most, he said quietly. I've had practice, Emily replied. Harris hesitated. Reeves spoke up for you. I know. You didn't ask him to. No. Harris studied her. Does that matter? Emily considered the question as they stepped into the hallway. The hospital had resumed its normal rhythm carts, rolling voices, low lives continuing. It matters, she said finally. Just not the way you think. As Emily headed back toward the ER, Reeves was being wheeled down the hall toward imaging. Their paths crossed again, fate persistent as ever. Their eyes met. Did they give you trouble? Reeves asked. They asked questions, Emily replied. You. They warned me, Reeves said, about consequences. And Emily prompted. Reeves smiled faintly. I told them I'd already faced the worst one. She raised an eyebrow. I almost died because I confused rank with judgment, he said. I won't do that again. Emily studied him for a moment, then nodded. Good. As the gurney rolled on, Reeves called after her. Emily. She turned. Thank you, he said, not for saving my life, for letting me learn something before it was too late. Emily held his gaze, then gave a small, decisive nod. That night, as the hospital lights dimmed once more, reports were filed, statements logged, and quiet decisions made in offices far from the ER. Some careers would slow, others would shift, and somewhere between silence and recognition, Emily Carter returned to work unchanged on the surface but no longer invisible. The Crest had done its job. Now came the aftermath. The complication came just after midnight. It didn't announce itself with alarms or shouting. No dramatic crash. No sudden rush of footsteps. It arrived quietly, slipping into Major Daniel Reeves' bloodstream like an afterthought, the kind that killed experienced men who thought the worst was already behind them. A monitor chirped once, then again. The night nurse frowned, leaned closer, and checked the screen. Reeves' blood pressure had dipped just enough to be concerning, not enough to panic. Yet, she checked the IV lines, then the surgical site. No obvious bleeding, no visible cause. Major, she said softly. Reeves opened his eyes, breath shallow. Something felt wrong. Not pain, he knew pain. This was colder, heavier. Call Dr. Whitmore, the nurse said, already moving, and page Emily Carter. 5 minutes later, the calm fractured. Reeves' pressure dropped again, harder this time. His heart rate spiked. The brace at his side grew warm. Internal bleed, Whitmore said as he entered, scanning the monitors. Delayed. Reeves tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. Emily was already there. She moved through the room with the same quiet efficiency as before, sleeves pushed up, gloves snapping into place. Her eyes took everything in at once, the numbers, the skin tone, the way Reeves's fingers curled unconsciously against the sheets. Retroperitoneal, she said. Slow leak. Missed vessel. Whitmore nodded. OR. Emily shook her head. He won't make transport. Not again. The words landed like a verdict. Reeves forced his eyes open, focusing on her face. Do it, he said hoarsely. Whitmore hesitated. Here, Emily met his gaze. Now. The room snapped into motion. Supplies were pulled, curtains drawn. The hallway outside cleared without explanation. Somewhere in the building a switch was flipped, locking the unit down in a way that didn't appear on civilian schematics. Emily's hands didn't shake. As she worked, Reeves drifted in and out, aware only of fragments, pressure on his side, voices overlapping the rhythmic insistence of her commands. Clamp. Stay with me. Not yet. He thought of the first time he'd seen that crest years ago, projected briefly on a classified slide, before being replaced by a redacted block of text. Support element, they'd called it. Embedded capability. He'd never imagined that capability would one day be standing over him, holding his life together with calm precision. Outside the room, Colonel Harris stood, rigid, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, he said quietly. It's happening again. A pause. No, this one doesn't wait for permission. On the other end of the line, a voice made a decision Reeves would never hear. Proceed, Harris said, then ended the call. Inside, the bleeding slowed, then stopped. Emily held pressure for a full 30 seconds longer than necessary, eyes never leaving the wound. Stabilizing, she said. Whitmore let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. You were right. Emily didn't respond. She was already closing. When it was done, Reeves lay still, pale but alive. The monitors settled into a steadier rhythm, as if acknowledging a debt paid. Emily straightened, flexing her fingers once. Only then did she feel it, the ache in her shoulders, the familiar burn behind her eyes. She stepped back. Whitmore looked at her. You just prevented a fatal complication. Emily pulled her gloves off. I finished a job. The doors opened. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by Undersecretary Miller. Her presence was unmistakable, measured steps, eyes that missed nothing. She took in the scene at a glance. So Miller said quietly, "This is what happens when we hesitate." Whitmore nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Miller turned to Emily. "You acted without clearance." Emily met her gaze. "If I hadn't, he'd be dead." Miller held the look for a long moment. "Noted," she said. Reeves stirred, eyes fluttering open. His voice was weak but clear. "Did we win?" Emily stepped closer. "You're still here." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Then yes." Miller watched the exchange with interest. "Major Reeves," she said, "you've just become a case study." Reeves frowned. "In what?" "In why rigid hierarchies fail under pressure," Miller replied. "And why people like her exist." Reeves looked at Emily. "People like her saved my life. Twice." Miller nodded slowly, and in doing so forced a lot of uncomfortable conversations. Emily finally spoke. "If those conversations stop the next person from dying, they're worth it." Silence followed, not the oppressive kind, but something closer to respect. Miller turned to Harris. "Ensure her actions are documented accurately." Harris inclined his head. "Already done." "And her position?" Miller asked. Emily answered before he could. "Stays the same." Miller raised an eyebrow. "You're certain?" "Yes." Miller studied her, then smiled faintly. "That may be the most dangerous choice you've made." Emily's expression didn't change. "I'm comfortable with danger." As Miller left, the unit slowly returned to its low, controlled hum. Reeves drifted towards sleep again, safer now than he'd been in days. Emily stood alone for a moment, staring at the monitor. 2 saves. No recognition requested, no apologies demanded, just consequences. As she turned to leave, Harris spoke quietly behind her. "Command won't forget this." Emily paused at the door. "Neither will I." Outside, a helicopter lifted from the hospital roof rotors, slicing the night air, not in urgency this time, but in acknowledgement. The climax had passed. The cost was now being tallied. Morning light filtered through the blinds of the private recovery room, cutting the sterile white into soft bands of gold. It was the kind of quiet that came after storms earned fragile and easily broken. Major Daniel Reeves was awake when Dr. Whitmore entered. "How are we feeling today?" Whitmore asked, scanning the chart. Reeves exhaled carefully. "Like I lost a fight with something bigger than me." Whitmore smiled faintly. "You did, and you won." Reeves nodded, then glanced toward the door. "Is she here?" Whitmore didn't need to ask who. "She's on shift." Reeves absorbed that. Part of him had expected irrationally that Emily Carter would disappear after the night before, pulled into some classified current and erased from the halls. The fact that she was still here, still working, grounded him more than the medication. Across the hospital, Emily moved through the ER with the same unremarkable efficiency she always had. She took reports, checked vitals, reassured patients. No one stopped her. No one questioned her authority. They didn't need to. The whispers were gone. In their place was something quieter, space. People deferred without announcing it, trusted without asking why. It was subtle the way real shifts always were. A trauma nurse fell into step beside her. "You okay?" she asked. Emily nodded. "Why wouldn't I be?" The nurse hesitated. "After everything." Emily paused, then offered a small, genuine smile. "This is everything." Later that morning, Colonel Harris arrived with a folder under his arm. He found Emily at the medication station, checking dosages. "They're finalizing the report," he said quietly. Emily didn't look up. And command has decided not to pursue further action." She nodded once. "Good." Harris watched her for a moment. It struck him again how unassuming she was. No visible hunger for acknowledgement, no resentment. "There will be changes," he added. "Policies, training updates." Emily finally met his gaze. "If they're honest, that's enough." "They are," Harris said, "because Reeves forced them to be." In recovery, Reeves was sitting up as Emily entered, flanked by a nurse. "You're hard to get rid of," Reeves said. Emily checked his monitor. "You're harder to kill." He chuckled, then winced. "Fair." The nurse stepped out, leaving them alone. "I heard command stood down," Reeves said. "Yes. You didn't have to stay," he said. "After what happened?" Emily met his eyes. "This is still my job." Reeves nodded slowly. "You ever regret staying quiet for so long?" Emily considered the question. "Sometimes. But silence kept me focused. It kept others alive." "And now?" Reeves asked. "Now, silence would be avoidance," she replied. "That's different." Reeves absorbed that. "I've been asked to address a training symposium about leadership under pressure." Emily raised an eyebrow. "That sounds official." "They want me to talk about what happened," Reeves said. "About assumptions, about listening." "And you will, yes," Reeves said without hesitation. "Because if someone with my rank can be wrong this publicly, it gives others permission to question themselves." Emily studied him for a long moment, then nodded. That's how change happens. Reeves' shifted expression serious. I owe you an apology. A real one. Emily shook her head. You already gave it. No, Reeves said. I acknowledged a mistake. That's not the same. Emily waited. I didn't just dismiss your care, Reeves said. I dismissed you. As a professional. As a person. His voice tightened. That won't happen again. Not from me. Emily's expression softened just a little. Apology accepted. They sat in silence for a moment, comfortable now. Outside the room, Undersecretary Miller watched through the glass before turning away. She made a note on her tablet, short, precise, the kind that shaped decisions far above hospital floors. By afternoon, Reeves was cleared for limited mobility. Physical therapy began in earnest. Each step was a negotiation with pain and pride. Emily watched from a distance as he took his first unsteady walk toward the window. The city stretched beyond, indifferent and alive. Looks different, Reeves said, noticing her. What does perspective, he replied. When you stop assuming the world bends to you. Emily smiled faintly. It does that sometimes. Later, as Reeves was settled back into bed, Harris approached him. You'll be transferred to a military facility tomorrow, Harris said. Reeves nodded. I figured. There will be follow-ups, Harris added. Reviews, discussions. Good, Reeves said. They should be uncomfortable. Harris almost smiled. In the locker room, Emily changed out of her scrubs at the end of her shift. She paused, fingers brushing the fabric over her forearm. The crest was still there. It always would be. But it no longer felt like a secret she carried alone. As she stepped into the hallway, Whitmore caught up to her. You ever think about teaching? He asked. Emily considered it. I think about preventing mistakes. Whitmore nodded. That's a good place to start. That evening, Reeves requested one last visit before his transfer. Emily stood at the foot of his bed. Thank you, Reeves said. For the second time. Emily inclined her head. Take care of yourself. I intend to, Reeves said. Then quieter, you changed how I see command. Emily met his gaze. Then it was worth it. As she turned to leave, Reeves spoke again. Emily. She paused. You didn't need the crest to be heard, he said. But I'm glad you showed it. Emily considered that. So am I. She left the room, the door closing softly behind her. Outside night settled over the hospital once more, calm, reflective, unburdened. The crisis had passed. The reckoning had begun. Justice this time wasn't loud. It was lasting. The transfer happened just before sunrise. The corridor was quiet, stripped of drama the way real endings always were. No cameras, no salutes. Just the soft squeak of gurney wheels and the low murmur of professionals doing their jobs. Major Daniel Reeves lay strapped in uniform, replaced by hospital grey rank, reduced to nothing more than a name on a chart. Pain pulsed beneath the brace at his side, but it no longer frightened him. He had learned the difference between danger and consequence. Colonel Harris walked beside the gurney clipboard tucked under his arm. You're headed to Bethesda, he said. Full recovery timeline still unclear. Reeves nodded. I'll manage. Harris hesitated, then added, Your statement caused waves. I hoped it would, Reeves replied. They won't forget it, Harris said. Good, Reeves answered. Neither will I. As the elevator doors opened, Reeves caught sight of someone standing near the nurse's station, hands clasped loosely, posture relaxed, eyes observant. Emily Carter. The gurney slowed. Reeves turned his head. You didn't have to come. Emily stepped closer. I know. They held each other's gaze for a moment, the noise of the hospital fading into background hum. You'll be fine, Emily said. Just don't rush recovery. Reeves huffed softly. You sound like you're still in charge. I am, she replied. Of your common sense. That earned a real smile, strained but genuine. Reeves grew serious. I meant what I said. At the symposium. In the reports. I didn't soften it. Emily nodded. I expected you wouldn't. They asked why you stayed, Reeves continued. Why someone like you chose anonymity. Emily glanced down the hallway where patients moved in wheelchairs. Families whispered. Life continued. Because this place doesn't need heroes, she said. It needs people who don't hesitate. Reeves absorbed that, then extended a hand as far as the restraints allowed. Emily took it without hesitation. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for saving my life, and for letting me earn the lesson." Emily squeezed once firm and brief. "Don't waste it." The elevator doors closed. Emily watched as the numbers ticked downward, then turned away, already shedding the moment. That was her way, no lingering, no sentimentality. She returned to the ER just as a new trauma rolled in. A construction accident. Broken ribs. Internal bruising. "Vitals?" she asked. The machine beeped steadily. Controlled chaos. Familiar ground. Hours later, after the shift slowed, Emily found herself alone in the stairwell again. Sunlight filtered through the narrow window, warm against the concrete. She rolled her sleeve up, not to reveal the crest, but to check the healing scratch near her wrist. The ink beneath it was unchanged. It always would be. Her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Symposium recording approved for internal circulation. Your role acknowledged." Emily read it once, then deleted it. Across the country, Reeves lay in a military hospital bed watching a briefing room fill on a screen mounted high on the wall. Officers sat in neat rows, expressions guarded. His own image appeared at the podium, recorded earlier, voice steady, words deliberate. "I thought authority meant being right," his recorded self said. "I was wrong. Authority means knowing when to listen." The room on screen was silent. Reeves exhaled slowly, chest tight with something like relief. Back at the civilian hospital, Emily finished her shift as she always did. Charts closed, supplies restocked, sleeves rolled down. She passed the nurse's station without comment, accepted a quiet nod from Whitmore, and stepped outside into the evening air. The city moved around her, unaware of the ripple effects, still spreading from one ER bay. A young intern hurried past, then stopped. "Miss Carter." Emily turned. The intern hesitated. "I just wanted to say, I watched how you handled that, Major. I didn't even know you could do that kind of procedure here." Emily studied her for a moment. "You can do more than you think," she said. "Just don't wait for permission when someone's life is on the line." The intern nodded, eyes wide, and hurried off. Emily smiled faintly. Weeks later, the hospital returned fully to normal. No black SUVs, no closed-door meetings, no hovering officials. But something had shifted. Decisions were questioned more openly. Titles carried less weight in trauma bays. People really listened when someone quiet spoke up. Emily remained exactly where she was. No promotion, no ceremony, no spotlight. And that was precisely the point. On a quiet night shift, as rain once again tapped against the windows, Emily adjusted an IV and glanced briefly at the reflection in the glass. For a moment she saw not the medic, not the operator, not the woman with the crest. She saw someone who had chosen when to speak, and when silence was no longer enough. Respect is not demanded by rank nor proven by volume. It is earned in moments where judgment matters more than authority, and humility matters more than pride. The most dangerous mistakes are not made by the inexperienced, but by those who believe their position makes them infallible. True leadership listens before it commands. True strength doesn't announce itself, and sometimes the person best equipped to save a life is the one no one thought to question. If this story moved, you share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? And if you believe powerful stories often come from the quietest people in the room, subscribe and stay with us.